There are moments in a spiritual journey that don't feel holy at all. Moments that don't feel like transformation or awakening. They feel like devastation and violation. And this was that moment for me. Because the truth didn't land gently or ease into my spirit. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Someone I had that close, closer than close, had been trying to destroy me. Not metaphorically, literally. And not a friend. She was someone with so much more access than a friend would have. With blood ties. Someone woven into the daily corners of my life. Privy to intimate shared life history. There's one clarification I need to make. Without emotion and without softness. She knew me. She was privy to my childhood. She knew my history. She knew the persistence required to build the life I have built. The patience and the effort. She knew I did not arrive here by accident. For a long time, the only thing that delayed my clarity was a single assumption that someone with all of this knowledge would think it would be too difficult to try to come for me anyway. But once the pattern completed itself, that assumption collapsed. At that point, only two explanations remained. Either she had repeated her distortions so often that she began to believe them, or she crossed into a state where reality itself no longer mattered. Years of projection, years of quiet resentment, years of narrating my life from a place of envy until the story replaced the truth. And when someone believes their own fiction long enough, they begin to feel entitled to act on it. But here's where the line was drawn. When she walked away with her mother that final night, after the party for both our mothers, cold, certain, and confident, the rage that tore through me wasn't just about what she did. It was about what they believed, because their certainty didn't come from impulse. It came from experience. It came from years of quiet orchestration, from long-term positioning, from calculated moves taken repeatedly in the physical world and in the unseen. They weren't experimenting. They weren't trying something. They had done this before. They believed the outcome was already in motion because they were using tools that they thought I would be unable to detect. In their minds, this story had an ending. Not loud or confrontational or traceable. The kind of ending people see on the news. A sudden accident, a freak collision, a fall that makes no sense, a sudden unexplained ending, a mental breakdown out of the blue that no one can explain. The kind where friends say, she had so much promise, she was so young, she had so much going for her, we didn't see this coming. The kind of ending where everyone is in shock, mourns briefly, and then moves on, filing the story away as tragedy and then forgotten. And that's the part people don't like to consider, because it's easier to believe these things are random. It's easier to believe that people just snap, lose their minds for no reason, that accidents are just accidents, that promising lives sometimes just collapse for no reason at all. But those stories exist because they happen, not just in films, not just in distant headlines. They happen in real lives, in real communities, to real people. And the confidence in their exit, the lack of hesitation, the absence of doubt, came from believing that I would become one of those stories. Erased without confrontation or questions, replaced without resistance. That was the plan. Not exposure, not conflict, removal. And the moment I saw that clearly, the rage was recognition. Because in that moment, I understood the full scale of what had been attempted. And I understood something else too. My survival was not luck. It was not coincidence. And it was not accidental. And when they walked away, the rage that tore through me wasn't just about what she and her mother did. It was about everything that I did not do. All the intuition and red flags I ignored. All the ways I kept dimming myself to make space for those with evil intentions. The rage wasn't just at her. It was at me. Because when she left, it felt like standing in front of a crime scene where I was both the victim and the perpetrator. My suffering was not because she left. My suffering was because I stayed. And the moment I really saw that, I was hit with the realization that I had sinned gravely against myself. That was the hardest blow of all. And I won't romanticize this part. The rage was real. It didn't arrive politely. It didn't ask permission. It came from injustice, from violation, from realizing someone tried to dismantle my life and walk away untouched. I didn't shut it down. I didn't rush myself through it. I felt it. I paced with it. I argued with it. I sat in rooms where it filled the air, and I even raged against it. But I noticed something even in the middle of it. The longer I stayed turned outward, replaying, imagining outcomes, rehearsing conversations that would never happen, the more I felt myself slipping away from myself. And that's where the choice appeared. Moment by moment, I realized that I could keep feeding the rage, or I could start feeding myself. So I didn't leap into healing. I edged towards it. I turned inward when I could. I rested when I couldn't. And I gathered what I was ready to gather. The gems and the lessons and the truth. And slowly and messily, I chose to keep living the life I had been building before these two wrecking balls. Not building it as I was before, but building it from a stronger, more honest place that could hold anger without letting it take the wheel. There were tears here, soul-felt and heartfelt, cried in absolute repentance and sorrow for the crime I had committed against my own spirit. The grief, the rage was the match. This was the part in the story where my dragon lit the entire damn forest on fire. Not in vengeance or destruction for destruction's sake, but in purification. Because fire does not lie or negotiate or ask politely for clarity. Fire reveals and exposes. Fire separates truth from illusion without favor. And when the fire rose, so did the dragon I had kept hiding away. Not the graceful creature people romanticize, no. This dragon came out roaring, feral and unapologetic. Rage became a holy force, burning down every illusion I had built to survive in a world that demanded I stay small. And in that fire, the revelations came. Not just about her. Those lessons were complete. The revelation was about everyone and everything else. When the fire rose around me, there was no confusion. People didn't hesitate. They didn't need time. They didn't ask questions. They chose. Some disappeared immediately, without understanding what was happening, because staying would have required discernment instead of surface judgment. They followed confidence without depth, certainty without integrity, and noise instead of truth. They aligned with someone who looked like they were going somewhere, spoke as if they had a plan, and performed stability convincingly enough that no one asked for proof. Looking closer would have exposed the lie, and looking closer would have required them to examine their own values, their own discernment, and the comfort they took in appearances. So they didn't look closer. They left, and the fire burned. Some aligned with what was familiar, even when it was fake and false, because truth would have required courage they didn't possess. And some people I believed would stand beside me, people I had laughed with, broken bread with, celebrated with, held through their own storms, people I had loved, walked away without a word. They didn't ask questions. They didn't check in. They didn't look closely enough to question the story they were being offered. They followed confidence without substance, direction without integrity, surface level certainty that felt easier than examining their own conscience. And what broke me the most was this. They didn't just drift. They ghosted, vanished, as if years of connection could be erased by a whisper in the dark. Then later, when the truth began to emerge, when my story finally came to light, they still chose to remain connected to people who had not only tried to destroy my life piece by piece, but had actively tried to end it in the physical through spiritual means. They maintained ties and stayed in their orbit. Some even tried to convince me that they could hold space for both sides, as if neutrality were possible in the face of an attempted annihilation. That was a second betrayal, a deeper one, because it revealed something I had never seen clearly. Their loyalty had never been loyalty. Their closeness had never been rooted. Their care had never been anchored in truth or character or discernment. I was left to wonder if that care was rooted in anything at all. They participated in conversations that reduced me to a storyline, letting lies shape their perception of someone they had known intimately. They accepted distortions, repeated rumors, aligned themselves willingly or passively with the force of two people motivated by envy and destruction. Whether they were fully aware of what they were aligning with or not, I was well aware that if my friend and her mother had their way, I would not be here today. And facing that and healing from that was one of the hardest things I have ever done. And then there were others, people who were more on the periphery of my life, who showed more integrity, discernment, and allegiance to truth than those who sat at my table for years, showed themselves to be the kind of people who I should have been closer to, checked in every now and again just to let me know that I hadn't been forgotten. And a very small number stayed. These were not people looking for direction. They were already fully living their own lives, leading themselves, building, creating, following their own paths with intention. Time had never mattered with them. We came together and apart with ease, always able to return to honest communion, to shared reflection, to real presence. It wasn't a surprise that they didn't perform or posture, that they didn't rush to conclusions or borrow someone else's certainty. They were still and grounded and present. And because they were sovereign in their own thinking, solidly centered within themselves, they were unshaken, as they have always been. The fire didn't just expose enemies. It stripped the room down to truth. And for the first time, I saw that entire circle without distortion. No softening, no excuses, no bending myself into empathy that most hadn't earned. And the fire burned. It burned through patterns I had not fully healed. I saw clearly where I had been overextending, self-abandoning, shouldering burdens that were never mine, holding entire situations together at my own expense, calling it help, calling it patience, love, and loyalty. And the fire burned. It showed me how I had let charisma override character, how eloquence masked manipulation, how association replaced integrity. It made me confront the fact that I had been hypocritical, accurate in my judgment of others, yet unwilling to apply the same standard to those I allowed closest to me. I had crystal clarity, and the fire burned. It showed me how in shielding people from the consequences of their own actions, I had delayed their growth and betrayed my own. And in that realization, I caught a glimpse, just briefly, of how the divine actually works. How nothing is wasted. How every deviation from truth creates its own lesson. How abandoning myself didn't remove me from the plan, but redirected the work inward. Truth, consequence, growth, all moving together. And standing inside that knowing, I felt something that humbled me completely. Not fear, not shame, not punishment. Awe. The kind that quiets you and reminds you how small you are and how deeply held at the same time. I understood that I was being corrected, yes, but corrected by something infinitely intelligent, precise, and loving. Not reprimanded harshly, reoriented, seen clearly, witnessed fully, allowed to feel everything without being cast away from God's grace. I felt the magnitude of the plan and my small but significant place inside it, not as a failure, but as a participant learning in real time. And that realization made me bow inwardly. Because to be corrected like that, with clarity, with purpose, with love, is not punishment. It is mercy. And then another truth arrived. What she and her mother meant for ill, God used for good. Because I was given a gift most people never receive so clearly. The chance to see, without distortion, exactly who I had been surrounding myself with. To see who deserved to sit close to my spirit and who never had. This was not a revenge story. And I want to be clear about something else. There is so much more that became visible to me after the fire. So many things that were revealed, so many confirmations, so many moments where the truth of what was happening behind my back came into focus and why it was happening. I received those insights quietly, through prayer, through discernment, through guidance that did not need witnesses. I have been blessed with the gift of sight, a bird's eye view. But those details are not mine to share. Not because I don't know them, not because I'm unsure, not because I'm afraid to speak, but because this story is not about exposure, and it is not about revenge. And by choosing not to disclose what I know, by refusing to drag private truths into public space, I'm extending a grace that was never extended to me. Because when my life was being undermined, when narratives were being shaped, when I wasn't in the room, when people were quietly aligning themselves with something false and destructive, there was no such restraint. There was no pause, no curiosity, no protection offered to me. And still, I choose integrity. I choose containment. I choose not to weaponize truth. That difference matters. And anyone listening who recognizes themselves in this contrast will understand exactly what it means. We are in charge of our own destiny, our own path, and nothing else. There is freedom there, in our own free will, the ability to choose one path over the next, to choose to walk in alignment or not. For anyone listening who finds themselves in this position, realizing that the threat didn't come from outside, but from within their own circle, from people they trusted, understand this. This is a choice point. Your strength in this moment is your lack of consent. Lack of consent to the narratives they have been constructing about and around you. Lack of consent to the version of you they are trying to install in the minds of others. Lack of consent to the false positioning they have been building at your expense. Do not agree. Do not internalize. Do not accept the identity they are trying to hand you. Remove yourself from their circle, energetically, emotionally, spiritually. Get as far away from them as possible. Whatever it is they were saying or doing to erase their narrative and destiny with something false is not your real concern. The illusion is fragile and fake, and they can't hold it up indefinitely. Resist the urge to fight dark with darkness. You'll be a match for darkness if you do. Instead, know this. People like this do not target just anyone. They scout and choose people who carry strength they want to possess, clarity they don't have, stability they can't build, a connection they can't access on their own. And that strength still exists in you. You, on the other hand, likely have your own connection to spirit, to God, because you don't get far enough in life to be targeted like this without having one. Lean into that connection now. This is how you fortify the armor of non-consent. Here, in communion with Spirit, however that communion looks for you. Because God doesn't care how you come to know Him. He cares that you do. That the connection is real, reverent, and lived. Because once that connection is established, it becomes your anchor, your direction, your protection. I know this because I live it. From that connection comes guidance. From that connection comes protection. From that connection comes clarity. And from there, you'll begin to recognize the allies who've been with you all along. Your angels, your guides, your protectors in the unseen. The ones who were warning you, waiting for the moment you were ready to see. They are your real allies. And if you co-create with them, if you listen and work with that guidance, they will show you the way out. But understand this. You can't be a passive bystander. Your progress now depends on your willingness to feel. Call it our superpower as human beings. Something society conditions us out of because we have been taught to think of feeling deeply as a weakness. What a lie we have been conditioned to believe, because for growth, it is your strength. So your only job now is to feel. Feel everything that rises. The grief, the anger, the disbelief, the heartbreak, and let it wash through you instead of lodging inside you. Feel it, visualize it, even give it a form and release it. Love yourself through this process. Put yourself first like you would with someone external to you who you love and cherish. Take all the time you need because you deserve the same care that you have given so freely. Do it again and again, as much as you need to get to the point of final release where your heart feels absolutely broken, until you see and feel the root of it. The root of it, your own accountability. Know that you're not a victim. Instead, you're in the middle of a divine lesson, divine redirection. Know and trust that you'll work your way back from that heartbreak stronger and wiser, because that feeling and that release creates sacred space. Space for expansion and elevation, space for clarity, space for healing, space for the growth that is already beginning. And yes, I know they're still sending spell work. It's unfortunate but telling that even with as much access as they had to the inner workings of my life, knowing more than most the obstacles that I've had to overcome to get to where I was, they still mistook my kindness for weakness. They looked at my gentleness, my good intentions, my generosity, my willingness to give grace, and decided that I must be naive, that I would be an easy target, that I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't know, that I wouldn't survive. They assumed that because I'm pleasant, because I choose to project positivity, because I am measured, because I don't lead with aggression or spectacle, that I had not been forged. They made a mistake. I don't look like everything I've been through, and I don't act like it either. I am not boastful about my scars. I don't broadcast the battles I've won. I don't announce the lessons I've paid for in blood, time, and fire. So they misread me. They underestimated the depth of my discernment, the strength of my spiritual discipline, the intelligence earned through lived experience, the fortitude required to endure what I've endured and still remain open-hearted. I can feel when energy hits my field that doesn't match my baseline. It feels foreign, like an aggressive knock at the door. So I lean into my spiritual practice, into prayer, into my connection with God, into the awareness that nothing out of resonance with me can attach to me. So it returns to them, and it keeps returning, accumulating in direct proportion. By now, I wouldn't wish the rebound of this darkness on my worst enemy. And I know this. They do not have the fortitude to withstand the backfire of what they have been summoning. They posture in social circles referencing the Bible, but not really grounding themselves in the teachings and the principles, not respecting the direction of the mornings, no real connection at all. The things they wished for me, the spells they paid for, the rituals they performed, the ill intent, it is likely now showing up in their own minds, their finances, their homes, their health, their stability, their relationships. Because what you send is what comes home to you when it cannot land. Because darkness does not disappear when it misses its target. That darkness still needs to be fed, and it still demands payment. And the cost is always extracted from the one who summoned it, since they are the most resonant with that energy. What they hoped to siphon from me, my energy, my stability, my life force, my abundance, my destiny, cannot be taken. I am not a match. I did not consent, and my field is sealed. So the darkness turns inward, hungry, uncontained, feeding on the very source that called it forth. Because every force you summon requires sustenance, and when it cannot be fed by its intended target, it consumes the one who opened the door. And then, in the quiet after the fire, I went inward, not distracted, not divided, but held in sacred solitude. The same sacred solitude that they helped me to create. And I chose myself, not in language, in action. I redirected everything, every ounce of energy I had poured into survival, into appeasement, into distortion, back into myself. My healing, my art, my spiritual practice, my true north. Extreme focus without distraction. Finally using all of that love and attention that I misdirected outward back into myself to create the kind of life I wanted, to bring in the kind of aligned relationships for my highest good, mutually supportive, not possessive, creating balance between work and the simple experience of just being, pursuing my own passions, finding an aligned way to give back. For every diamond I've gathered forged from the fire. And the dragon remained, not separate, not suppressed. My dragon is free now. She's as cherished as the soft parts of me, the loving parts, the compassionate parts, the innocent parts. She walks beside me, and I trust her. When she signals that something must burn, I let it burn. Because her fire does not destroy my life, it restores it. And I am whole and more balanced and more sovereign because I embrace her. This is not the end of the story. This is the return. The dragon doesn't just rise, she comes home.